My name is Tandi and I identify myself as a proudly African.
Hi, my name is Syn Cole and I identify myself as a Christian.
I go by the name of Kevin, and yeah, what is self-identity to me? I would define self-identity as having values in life and knowing your purpose in life. Before you can know your purpose in life, you gotta deeply understand where you're originally from, and to me, that's what keeps me going. And why do I define self-identity such as, it allows me to just be me. It allows me to do everything.
My name is Nini, and I'm from Zimbabwe, which is in the southern part of Africa. I'm proud African. Identity is a sense of belonging, sense of knowing where you fit in, sense of knowing who you are exactly as a human. You just can't go not knowing exactly who you are, where you fit in, what you want to do even in life.
Hello, my name is Sar, and I identify myself as Karen. Karen is one of the ethnic groups from Burma.
No.
No.
It's like, and that's all. No.
Experience identity crisis all the time. People assume that I'm from China because my eyes are small.
No.
Tell us about yourself. What do you do for a living? Where are you from? These are some of the many questions we find ourselves asking the next person that we want to connect to. Could it be that we unconsciously do this in order to gauge a level to how we can connect to the next person? Well, I don't know. But joining me today is Tandi, a mental health advocate,
Yes.
to talk us through what identity. I guess we'll get started with the first question of how does identity or how does culture shape our identity?
Wow, that's an interesting question. I think we all know that culture is the way that people live, and if we look back to a person like me, I'm from Zimbabwe, and I'm from the Shona tribe, so that helps create my identity. But within the Shona tribe is different traditions from different parts of Mashonaland, and that also helps to shape who I am. So I'm from the Rotary tribe.
Okay.
So there's tribes within those subsections.
Yeah.
So all of those things help to shape who I think I am. So growing up, I would identify myself as someone from Masvingo, who is a Rotary person, who is Shona, and as an adult, who is Zimbabwean. But as I traveled from Zimbabwe and I lived in England, and now I'm here in Australia, I see myself as a global citizen.
Okay.
I like that.
And the reason that I think I'm a global citizen is because I don't want to be put in a box.
Yes.
You by just looking at me, I'm in Australia right now, you can tell that my heritage is not Australian. Okay, so I am African.
Yeah.
But who I am as a person is influenced by my environment, the people that I've come across, my experiences in life, the core values that I was taught growing up.
Yes.
So I take all of those things and my religion, and I have to say I'm a very open-minded person. So I will learn from a Muslim if I have to.
Yes.
I'll learn from a Christian if I have to, and I'll learn from an atheist if I have to. Because I don't like being put in a box. We're not puzzles.
Yes.
So I don't think we're meant to fit in, but I think we should belong.
Yeah.
And belonging, we can't base it on where we come from. So we can't say because I'm Zimbabwean, I belong to the Zimbabwean community. Yes, I am Zimbabwean, but I belong to a group of people who share the same values as me, who might not necessarily agree with me all the time. And that is one thing that I've learned over the years, that I do need people who sometimes challenge and question my way of thinking. And as I've lived longer now in Australia, what I call community is not people from my country of heritage. It's people who, when I'm around them, I can be myself and I belong. That's my community. So then my identity, who I see myself as a global citizen, is not narrowed down to my country of heritage, to my cultural beliefs, and to my religion, or to where I live.
Yes.
But just where I feel safe. If I'm in a safe space with people from all parts of the world, those people then are my community. So I have now decided that I don't want to be put in a box. I don't want to be called black and be stereotyped as a black woman.
Yes.
I don't want to just be called an African, because I am more than just
Yes.
all of those things.
Absolutely.
And I don't know if that answers your question. So I'm an individual, just like all of us, with a lot of experience, just the journey of moving from Africa to go and live in England, and then now in Australia. It shapes who I am. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I think we should be moving away from this idea of putting ourselves in boxes and belonging to those boxes, because we will not grow as people if I say I'm African and I only have African friends. How am I going to learn about the Australian culture, the Asian culture, the way of doing things, and be accepted by them, and also accept them if I don't put myself out there?
Wow, that is so interesting. You brought up a beautiful point on that. And I'd like us to draw back to one of the things that you said, which is obviously not to box ourselves. Looking at it on a younger perspective, as young adults, right? We do have a generation, right, or the society expectations that have been just lined up, whether by culture or experiences, right? So you get sayings like this, for example. I was thinking more of this one. You have lost your roots, you've lost your culture. If you become open-minded, the word you use to say open-minded, if you become open-minded, not to confine yourself in the box, you get terms being thrown at you like that. You've lost your ways, you've lost your identity, you don't know who you are. So how can we, coming back to that as well, it might be easy to accept it from a personal perspective, but how can we address it going forward, or reinforce that resilience that we have individualism and we need to break through cultural barriers?
I think the way that I look at it is culture is not static. Things change, and sometimes we have to adapt. So personally, I'm a rebel. And I've always been a rebel. Now that I look back at who I've been, I can see that I've always been someone who challenges things, and challenges why things are done the way that they're done. And I'm always, I guess you'd say, for people who've got young kids now, I was that kid who challenged and questioned my mom on a lot of things, which was against what culturally we're supposed to do. So I think, going back to your question, if the values that are instilled in you by your family, if you take those, never mind where you're from. So what we were taught growing up is respect for elders, kindness, love, helping others.
Yes.
Yeah, and being part of a community. Yeah. So if you take those values, even if you want to be a rebel and come out of the box, if you do it with respect, people will respect you. And if you try and explain what it is that you're trying to do, and why fitting in a box is not working for you in a respectful way, they might not agree with it, but if they're open to learning, they'll hear you.
Yes.
Yeah. So and what's difficult for parents, and what I find as a parent myself, is I was raised not to challenge elders, not to question, but I've got kids who are challenging me, asking me questions all the time. And I've made a conscious decision to be a parent who answers questions. Not a parent who says, no, we don't talk about that. There's nothing that we don't talk about. Because I've seen how not talking about things has led to issues being swept under the carpet under the name of culture. We talk about rape, or, we talk about mental illness. We talk about, there's a lot of issues in our community that we don't talk about under the name of culture, and we don't do that. But that's where then I, as a rebel, I think, no, we have to be having those conversations. So I think for young people, it's remembering the values that you have been taught and explaining to parents, which I think sometimes can be hard. But if you're respectful in the way that you do it, without answering back, we know the talk back that I'm talking about that our African moms do not appreciate. I think if we try and sit down and explain where we're coming from and what we're trying to do, I think there could be a change in the way the elders see us, because now more and more we're starting to have conversations about empowering the youth, and empowering the youth means giving a voice to them and listening to them. So I think as parents, we have to be open and grow with our children. Sometimes being overprotective of our culture robs our children of creating an identity for themselves. And I saw that in my own kids, that in as much as I want them to be African, they can't relate to the Africanness that I want them to have, because I don't spend that much time back home. So I can only teach them the values that I was taught by my parents, and hope that they grow up being respectful people who are kind to others. And we'll go home as much as we can, but I want them to have those values first. That's what's important to me.
So what do we do with the missing gaps? Because obviously you did say, talking to parents, there is already a gap that exists between parents and their kids. And I guess in a way, talking to parents about these issues, kids don't know how to, because they've never been taught how to. So closing that gap for starters, how do we do that? And how do we let the young ones know that it's okay, you can talk to your parents about this and you won't get in trouble? And because I'm coming from the approach of, like, in one of my units, they touched on advertisements for smoking. How you can't tell someone to stop smoking by telling them what it does, because they already know.
Yeah.
So you have to give them options, and this is what you can do.
Yeah.
If you know,
Do this
you don't. Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So how do we close that gap without appearing too confronting to parents?
Yeah. It's a good question.
Do you know, there was a project that I got involved in, and it made me realize that really and truly the way our parents view their role is to raise us to be independent and to be able to also look after them.
Yeah.
And they never played with us.
No.
So play is very important.
Oh, yes.
It cannot be underestimated. And you know, I say to my friends, and I say to a lot of people, I'm a playful mom. And what that means is I will play with my kids. And I dance a lot, you know, all those crazy dances that kids come up with. I try and learn them. We play cards, we'll play African games. I'll try and teach them African games. We'll run around. If they've got a laser gun going, I'm in there with the laser gun playing, right? And because it's through play that I can get to have a good relationship with them, so they feel comfortable to talk to me. Right? But this is me thinking that the way that I was raised, this is the bit that I need to change. I need to be more playful. You know, I'm still a mom and I can still put on my mom voice, but I also have time to play.
Balance.
So, and a lot of our parents did not have that time with us, and they did the best they could with the resources that they had. So now coming into the first world, I think if there's an opportunity for us to play with our parents, that's where we start connecting, is through play. Bring a child in here. If you let them sit there, they'll do whatever they want to do. But if you say, come, let's play, they'll start opening up. Yeah? So creating environments where the youth and the parents can play. Because when you're playing, you let your guard down. You don't care what you look like, you know, all of that. You put it to one side. And it's through that, creating those kind of environments, whether through art, our parents, they're skilled with, you know, with knitting, loads of things. Like I was taught to knit and crochet by my mom when I was 5. And up to now, I can do it. I do it way better than her. Right, but that's a skill that I learned from her. So here in the Western world, if we can create spaces for the youth to do stuff with the parents, then we can start to address those issues, because individually it might be difficult. Because of emotions and what the expectations of us are. They had their own struggles and they want the best for us, and sometimes wanting the best for us, they force their best for us on us, but that's not what we want. We see it in careers. Parents wanting children to be lawyers, doctors, scientists, and accountants. And kids saying, hang on a minute, I want to do art. But trying to articulate that to a parent who struggled, they're thinking, I sent you to school to do art. Who's ever succeeded? And then you go, oh, so and so has done art. How many? Because they've got their own expectations. So I think just creating a safe environment where different generations and age groups can interact with each other. And sometimes in my work, I see organizations and community groups saying we want to work with the youth. We want to work with women only. We want to work with men. But I say after you've done all that, you need to bring everyone together, because there's no point in empowering the youth for them to go to a household where they'll get stuck. because that's what's causing homelessness, that's what's causing intergenerational conflict between parents, because you guys, you're now more empowered, you know what you want. Yeah, and trying to articulate that to a parent whose thinking is, I need my child, I need to make sure that my child takes a career where they'll always have a job, and that career has to be nursing. Yeah? And they want, it will be hard to break through. So I think we just need spaces where we can play and start having these difficult conversations about sexuality, you know, conversations about marriage, conversations about, you know, rape, all of these conversations, mental illness, how it's affecting everyone, you know. And then from there we can start to create our own solutions.
Yes.
We don't need anyone to tell us this is the way to solve this problem. We do have the resources amongst ourselves to create those solutions for us.
Wow.
I just wanted to know, how does our identity or who we identify as affect our mental health? Knowing that in our social structures, there's a stigma attached to mental health.
So I would have to start by saying I believe we should not try and fit in, but we should belong. Because when you're trying to fit in, if you think of a puzzle, and you're doing a jigsaw puzzle, and you have a piece, and if that piece doesn't fit, doesn't work, does it?
No.
And it's the same. If you are amongst people who you think you have to try hard and you can't be yourself, you're gonna try and fit in. But what is healthier for all of us is to belong to a group of people. They don't have to be loves, but just people who you can be yourself. Yeah, and it will help you. It will help to shape who you want to be. So by trying to fit in, you'll find that we'll try hard. Sometimes then you take on other people's dreams and neglect your own just so you can be accepted. And then if that doesn't happen, and because you're fighting yourself, that's when you start seeing issues of identity crisis.
Yes.
And not knowing where you belong. And this is harder in our social, social structures, like I was saying. If you think you're Zimbabwean and you only belong to the Zimbabwean community and those are going to be your people, then you're going to have to fit into that. But if you find people from all walks of life and you feel you belong and you can be yourself, then you will shine. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, for people not to, it goes back to putting people in boxes and saying this is where they belong.
Yes.
You African, this is how you parent. As Africans parent like this. I'm an African young woman, I have to get married. So can you see the pressures that you can start putting on yourself? Or I am an African male, I have to have a house or be married by this age. So then you start fighting yourself, trying to belong, and you push yourself to do things that you don't necessarily want to do, and it will impact on how you view yourself in the world, your place in the world. And then we start seeing people thinking along the lines of, am I a failure just because I didn't get married at this age? Am I a failure because my marriage didn't work? Because we're putting each other in boxes and using those boxes to define who we are. So knowing who you are and what you want out of life, and it's difficult to figure out. But if you are among the right people, they'll be able to sometimes help you see your potential. And this could be people from other parts of the world. So I think just being around people where you feel you belong, I think that's the key to having mental health. So you avoid having a mental illness. Because when you start thinking about those things, not getting married or not having children, and the pressures that come with that, those are the things that can lead to depression. Those are the things that can lead to anxiety, or thinking, I'm black, I'm not good enough, I'll never make manager, I'll never make partner. Then you limit yourself because of your beliefs. But if you think outside of all those labels and stick to who you want to be and who you believe you are, then you will surround yourself with people who believe in you. And what's harder, I think, for us who come from culturally diverse communities is struggle is shameful. And it shouldn't. Because who has not struggled one way or another? You know, since they were born, kids are struggling. We're all struggling. From people from all walks of life. Even the most successful people have their struggles. But from our heritage, struggle is shameful. Illnesses are shameful. If you think of the stigma that was attached, or that still is attached to HIV. And how a lot of people then stop taking their medication just so that they're not labeled. It's the same with mental illness. So we have all these pressures of saying we're African, we have to do these things in a different way, in this way. And if those things do not work, then we fall into, our mental health starts sliding to the point that we might end up with a mental illness, which is again shameful. And that is, and you can tell now, because there's been an increase in suicide rates within the African community. Some of them are young people, university students, some have failed. So I know someone who committed suicide because she felt pregnant and she didn't want to tell her parents. It's all those pressures of struggles that everyone goes through. And I think the moment we start to be okay with struggling, we're going to start being okay with asking for help. And we'll break those taboos. We will break those taboo subjects, whether someone has been sexually violated. If we're saying that it's not right, let's talk about it. Because not talking about it will keep it inside and it will eat you. So that's how we then end up with a lot of mental illness in the community that is not diagnosed, because people do not want to be seen as mad, which is the word that we use. But I was diagnosed with depression 4 years ago, but if I'm walking in the streets, you would not know. And that's why I share my stories, so people can see that it's not the end of your life. Some people recover, some people get better, and some for some it's the rest of their life taking medication. Some it just works differently. So I think we need to start talking about the pressures that we put on our kids, the pressures we put on ourselves, and realizing that struggle sometimes can be empowering. Mine actually empowered me.
Wow, I love that. Wow. You mentioned something on, boxing ourselves. And I think one big problem that we have is we are afraid to love people from afar when their season has ended in our lives. And that also prevents us from speaking out about whatever it is that we're dealing with, because you said something about trying to fit in. So whether those friends are for you or not, you're just so focused on trying to fit in that you forget to examine whether these people are feeding your growth or not. So I really love that.
Yes. Oh, thank you. I think what I love about individualism is somehow you're forced to look after you. You become number one. And I love my children to bits. And I also know that I love me. And I know that for me to be a good mom and to do the things that I do, I have to look after myself. And sometimes what that means is I'll get home and I'll tell my kids that mom needs me time for 2 hours. Please do not distract me unless it's an emergency. And I just have time to myself. Sometimes for me, it means I travel on my own, leaving my kids, because that's what I need to do to be able to come back and be a better mom.
Wow. Absolutely.
Yeah? And I think, you know, when we go back to talking about culture, I don't want to be called just someone who comes from a collective community. I'm both. Like I said, I'm a global citizen. So where it fits and works for me, that's what I take. And this individualism works for me. I'm always laughing and smiling because I've since learned that I need to value myself and love me in order to love others.
Absolutely.
If I'm not loving me, I will not be able to extend love. I will not be able to do the work that I do, which is now mostly for others. I advocate for others more than I advocate for myself. So it means, you know, we should not be labeling ourselves. We should be using the labels to seek solutions only. Yeah, so we can't forget that we're African, there's issues. We can't forget that there's racism. But let's look for solutions moving forward.
Absolutely.
We were not denying that there's problems in the world, but what we're saying is those problems should not define us. Let's look past them and start having the difficult conversations. And
Wow, I think ultimately you've answered the two questions that I wanted to ask you.
Okay.
Because you highlight almost every aspect of everything in your answers. So I wanted you to comment a bit more about identity crisis, but that came up in your explanation of how one can reach that and how it happens that someone is propelled in that direction. So it's quite interesting, but I also wanted to bring in a term that I came across, and that is it's called sonda. So that means that we as humans, we go through the same emotions, we go through the same, struggles in life, even though it's in different experiences. We all experience pain, we all experience hurt, right? And then you brought in this aspect of, struggling should not be a shame. That is your empowerment, that is your story, that should be your driving force, right? And then looking at that and what the topic stands for today, the discussion of the meta, which is identity, bringing us back. We as humans are a collective. Before anything, we should acknowledge ourselves as humans. And that's where it should stop. If we can stop at understanding that the next person feels pain and hurt just as much as I do, we will be able to stick to those core values and address those, stick to our core values of kindness, to better love the next person next to us. So let's dig deep within ourselves. Today, thank you so much for joining us.
I would love you to talk a bit more on identity crisis from a purpose. From purpose, because I came across a book by I think T.D. Jakes, where to step into your purpose you have to know your identity. And the question that I had in mind was that, so if someone doesn't know their identity or who they are, does that mean they won't live their purpose?
It's a journey. So for me, I lived now half my life in Zimbabwe and the other half in the Western world. And I had to, as I was growing up, I left when I was a teenager, and as I was growing up, I started to challenge a lot about our culture. And in that challenge, I wanted answers. And it wasn't always easy because the way that I think was so different to most people who put themselves in the I'm only African box. So then I when young people talk about identity crisis, I also experienced that even as a mom, because I had to challenge the way that I wanted to bring my kids is not necessarily bring up my kids is not necessarily how I was raised. I only want the core values. The rest of the things that didn't work well for me, I want to leave it and grab onto the new things that I think work for me. So I think discovering yourself and who you are is not something that can happen overnight. My experience is what I've gone through in life has helped to shape who I am. And now I can speak about taboo subjects because I've gone through those challenges in my own life, and I've realized that they do not define me. So it's a journey, I think, that, you know, most people go through. That's why you find even when kids finish year 12 and they ask what you want to do, they don't know. You ask an adult who's worked in banking for years and they say they don't want to do banking anymore. And sometimes you ask them, so what do you want to do? And they don't know because it's a journey. But sometimes once you step out and you start thinking about what it is that you're passionate about or what drives you, then you learn who you are, and it's through struggles, it's through the happy moments, and then you can then be able to do what you want to do purposefully. So now I advocate for mental health services. There's no shame when I talk about my story, but it's because I had to go through that pain and that struggle and accept who I was. And that is, you know, I'm a young mom who's struggled, who was confused at the time, didn't know what was happening, was lonely, felt isolated on her own. But those things don't define me. So I'm human, and I love what you said about all of us feeling pain, because when you look at, let's say, mental illness and identity, and you hear in the community people saying mental illness it's a Western, you know, it's Western illness and disorders. And I often say when I'm working with people, the pain that I felt, if you've ever lost a job, what you go through is exactly what you know, a Caucasian goes through when they've lost a job. So that pain is the same. If you lose your mom or you lose someone you love, the pain is the same. So we are all one, I guess, and we just need to be embracing more of who we are. Just be individuals and believe in ourselves more. Hard to do, but you know, we'll get there. I believe we'll get there.
Wow, I love it. Awesome. I'm so refreshed. It's refreshing talk. Quite to the T, to the detail. Do let us know how you feel about identity, or the role of identity in how we identify ourselves in the community and how that plays a huge role. There's a lot to learn, and Tandi also mentioned that we can equally learn from each other. So we're definitely looking forward to your comments, guys. Comment, feedback, and yes, we'll explore a bit more on identity. And which something,
community.
Yes, on the community. So it was an honor to have you here today. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you so much, Molly, for being with us as always.
Thank you so much.
All right, see you. Bye for now. Don't forget to subscribe.